Good morning, everyone. Today we are looking at some things that we need to understand, some lessons that we need to learn from Jeremiah chapter 52. As we close the book of Jeremiah, we're going to see a number of things that are maybe a little bit more abstract lessons than the straightforward things that we've talked about in many of the chapters. But allow me to spend a couple of minutes looking at some things that are of interest, I believe, but also of importance when it comes to Jeremiah chapter 52. Now, the beginning of chapter 52 is almost exactly the same verbiage as what you see in Jeremiah chapter 39 when it comes to the account of Nebuchadnezzar coming in the days of Zedekiah and what befalls Zedekiah and things of that nature. So I'm not really going to spend a lot of time there because we discussed that when we got into chapter 39. But I do want to make a couple of points beginning in verse 17. When you drop down to verse 12, there's new information that is going to be given about what happens when Nebuzaradan begins sacking the city of Jerusalem. And one of the things that I find very interesting, beginning in verse 17, is the fact that he goes in and he begins taking the things out of the temple. And he begins sacking the temple. He talks about the bronze pillars in the house of the Lord, the carts and the bronze sea that were in the house of the Lord, and also the pots, the shovels, the trimmers, the bowls, the spoons, and all of the bronze utensils, and anything that was gold and silver gets taken out and taken to Babylon. I want you to notice something, though. Do you see anything missing in all of that list? It is interesting to note that all of the basic furniture of the temple is not included in the list of what was taken to Babylon. It's not included in the accounts in Kings and Chronicles, nor is it included in Jeremiah's account. Now, there are all kinds of theories, there are all kinds of ideas and things of that nature as to where they went and when they went and how they went. And the fact of the matter is, we simply do not know. One of the interesting things, though, is that those items, from the Ark of the Covenant to the table of showbread to the candlestick and all of the things in between, none of those items, to our knowledge, are ever seen again. You do not read about them anywhere in the rest of the Old Testament. You also do not read of them anywhere in the New Testament. As a matter of fact, when you come over to the book of Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 9, when the writer there is talking about the articles of the tabernacle, the original tabernacle, he talks about that these are things of which we cannot now speak in particular, and most believe that that is a reference to the fact that the original items that were a part of the temple were no longer present. They were no longer accessible. And so because of that, it is something very interesting that you find here in Jeremiah chapter 52. As all of these things over the preceding verses are taken out of the temple, there is no more reference to the articles that God commanded to be built when it came to the original tabernacle. A couple of other points I want us to consider from chapter 52 before we close the book of Jeremiah. The first one is found in beginning in verse number 24. And there we have an account that takes place of the priests and of the religious leaders of the Jews, as well as those who were of the king's associates that are found in the city of Jerusalem at this time. They are going to be taken to King Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar is going to kill them. He is going to execute them when they are brought his way. It's going to deal, in portion anyway, with many of the statements that Jeremiah is going to make earlier in the book pertaining to what was going to happen to those who were ignoring the warnings and were refusing to listen to the promises of God when it came to the judgment upon Judah. Many of these very same people, if not all of these very same people, were ones who had mocked Jeremiah. They were ones who had refused to listen. They had called Jeremiah a liar. They had thrown him in prison. They have done all of these various things to Jeremiah. refusing to adhere to what God says. God had warned them that this day was coming, and Nebuchadnezzar is going to bring it about. And so once again, failure to listen to the warnings of God only winds up bringing hardship and misery and destruction in the end. The last thing that I want to note from chapter 52, and again, this is an area where we don't exactly know, but I want to point it out because it is something that kind of jumps out at you when you get into the chapter, and that is the statements of verses 28 through 30, where there it talks about these three groups that Nebuchadnezzar carries away. There's a lot of discussion because the dates don't necessarily match up with what we generally call the three carryings away of the people of Judah, beginning in 609 or 606 BC, and then 597 and 586. These are close, but they're not identical. And so there's a couple of different schools of thought in regard to this. The first one is that these are both talking about identical situations and identical carryings away, but that the dates are either so close together or they cross over a year or various things of that nature while all of these events are taking place, that one takes the beginning of it happening and the other takes the end of it happening. The other one says that these are not the same three carryings away. These are not the major carryings away of large portions of the people of Judah, but rather these are smaller groupings that would have been carried away at different times, close to the times of the major carryings away, but would have included major members of the royal family, maybe military leaders, social leaders, things of that nature that were going to be brought for specific purposes back into the land of Babylon. It is interesting to note that you have relatively small numbers. In the first carrying away, you have a very large number. You have over 3,000. But in the next two accounts, you have less than 1,000 each time that are going to be carried away. As a matter of fact, the total number for all three carryings away is going to be less than 5,000. It's going to be 4,600. Well, we know that there were far more than 4,600 people who were carried away into Babylon in the days that Nebuchadnezzar is carrying these people away. Remember, there's only going to be a very small number that are going to be left in the land of Judah. And so you're going to have, as we're going to see in Ezekiel very, very shortly, this large number of Jews that are going to be taken into Babylon and taken into foreign lands. I don't think that it fits that these are the three carryings away. As a matter of fact, it is almost universally ascribed that the third carrying away is what transpires after the time of Gedaliah's murder that we read about earlier in the book of Jeremiah. What it does seem to be is it does seem to denote that there are other times where Nebuchadnezzar takes away key individuals and he takes away various groups of the people of Judah outside of what we generally call the three main carryings away. Now, do we know for certain? No, we don't. But trying to force this particular account to fit into the other account when they're not identical is a very touchy situation and winds up in many cases doing more harm than good. So we at the very least need to be open to the possibility that it is something different from that is being discussed, that it's not the main statements of carrying away that is being discussed like what you have in Kings and Chronicles and even earlier on in the book of Jeremiah. So just something to consider in all of that. I know I've been a little bit lengthy this morning. Thank you for bearing with me through it. I hope that these things have been beneficial to you and have maybe helped give you some things to think about from Jeremiah 52. Thank you for joining me through this study. Thank you for taking the time to continue going through this study. And we will begin next week with the book of Ezekiel. Until then, have a great day.